welcome to the PCN Capitol Preview. I'm Francine Schertzer. Today we'll talk about the primary election. You can join our discussion by calling us toll-free at 1-877-PA6-5001 or text us at 717-219-4001. But first, we're joined by Charlie Wolfson, reporter at PublicSource. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me.
You wrote that young voters helped to decide the 2020 election in Pennsylvania. What issues drove them to the polls at that time?
2020 had some of the highest youth turnout we've ever seen in Pennsylvania. Climate change was a big one. But more than anything else, it was kind of an opposition to Donald Trump. I think young people voted for Joe Biden in huge numbers, and this was kind of their first chance, especially for the youngest voters, their first chance to vote against Donald Trump. So they were really motivated by that.
Have you gotten any indication of the level of engagement this year?
Well, I can't predict anything like turnout, but the young people we spoke to for this story are really not sounding very excited to vote this year. That doesn't mean they're not going to vote, but it seems like a low enthusiasm or even anxiety or frustration over the election this year, which is really different from what we've seen in the past, at least from my perspective.
You talked about anxiety and frustration. Tell us a little bit more about the sentiment over the current political landscape.
Yeah, so there's a sentiment of, frustration over who the choices are, the nominees being Biden and Trump once again. There's a frustration over young people not feeling like they had a choice over who the nominees were, and just basically that there's some disbelief that this is the matchup once again. It's kind of, and it is a historic moment that this kind of rematch is extremely unusual in American history, and it's kind of just seems bizarre to some of these younger voters who haven't experienced that many elections.
What issues do young voters deem important, and has that changed from 4 years ago?
So there's certainly more of an emphasis on reproductive rights now than there was 4 years ago. Of course, the Dobbs decision, which rolled back Roe v. Wade, occurred just 2 years ago. So it's much more of a factor now than it was in 2020. That's the big one, I would say, that's different.
How good of a job are the candidates doing at engaging with these younger voters on issues such as reproductive rights?
Yeah, so some experts told me that part of the reason there may not be that much enthusiasm is that the issues that these younger voters hold really closely, such as climate change, such as the war in Gaza for some of them, are not really being centered by either of the candidates. Of course, Joe Biden had some legislation on climate change. He talked about it quite a bit in 2020, but right now it's not at the center of his campaign. And that's that's a big topic that drives young voters.
Some have made an issue about particularly Joe Biden's age. Joe Biden is in his early 80s. Donald Trump is in his late 70s. Do you think age is much of a factor for relatability between these candidates and young voters?
Yeah, young voters definitely seem concerned about the age of both candidates. I don't know that it's a deciding factor, at least for the people I've spoken to, but it's definitely something they're noticing. And I think a lot of them would prefer to have a younger choice, but I don't know that will decide how a lot of them cast their ballot.
What do registration numbers look like for those that are newly eligible to vote?
Yeah, so registration and turnout among, the 18 to 25 set is typically lower than the general population. That's been true pretty much every election. And registration is lagging, at least in Western Pennsylvania, where I looked at data. It's lagging behind where you would want it to be. But of course, these people are just kind of starting to turn 18 now, so it should improve as we get closer to November.
As you talk to young voters and those that were trying to inspire new voters to register and vote for the first time, what kind of tactics are they using, or what kind of issues are they using to try to get them inspired to register and make it to the polls?
Yeah, so it's hard. Some of the people I spoke with are very heavily politically engaged. Some of them are not. Those ones that are, though, they're involved in clubs at school around registering voters. They're involved. I spoke with some who are in high school, some who are involved in college political clubs, and they said, it's hard for their peers who are not very politically active. Those people are not that interested in talking about this Biden versus Trump election, and it's not a topic that really people are excited to talk about right now.
What do you think needs to happen to inspire voters and perhaps get a younger generation more engaged in moving forward?
What do I think needs to happen? Just candidates, as always, just need to engage with every cohort, which includes the youngest voters. Pennsylvania was decided by, I believe, 80,000 votes in 2020, 40,000 in 2016. So every small group is going to be important.
Charlie Wolfson, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thanks so much for having me.
More of the PCN Capitol Preview after this short break. Welcome back. Our guests today are Lawrence Tabas, chair of the state Republican Party, and Senator Sharif Street, chair of the state Democratic Party. Senator Street, we'll start with you. Tomorrow's primary election day in Pennsylvania. To what extent do you expect tomorrow's results to be indicative of how the general election may go in November?
Well, look, I think what happens in the primary and the general are very different. Certainly in the general, we're going to have a much bigger contrast of ideas and thoughts. And the primary is really about who's the best messenger to deliver those ideas. At least in our party, many of our candidates there's broad agreement on a number of things, like choice, like investment in education. And, you know, in the general election, there'll be a contrast. So I think there's some things we can learn, but I wouldn't read too much into it.
Lawrence Tabas, your thoughts?
I tend to agree with the senator, except for one point. I think that we have seen in the other primaries throughout the nation, especially in key battleground states, Joe Biden was getting a lot of his Democratic voters voting against him by saying no choice or no preference in Michigan, North Carolina, Kansas, Hawaii, Minnesota. And so I think to that extent, if Biden doesn't get all the votes tomorrow in the primary, if he gets a lot of none of the aboves like he has in these other battleground states, I think that sets up what we're looking at for a Republican win in November.
Reminder to our viewers, if you'd like to join in on today's discussion, you can call us toll free at 1-877-PA6-5001 or text your question to us at 717-219-4001. Lawrence, if Democratic voters do as you say and say no preference, they don't vote directly for Joe Biden, what do you think that translates to in the fall?
I think that the voters are starting to send the message that they did much better under the Republican primary policies during President Trump's administration and when Republicans were in control. I think this election in November is going to be about what party and whose candidates will make lives better for Pennsylvanians and all Americans. And I think that's what we're seeing in these votes in other states where Democratic voters are not voting for the president. He's losing his base. His approval rating in Pennsylvania is amongst Pennsylvanians is 36%. And when you go to 18 to 34-year-olds, it drops down to the high 20% range. So on the key issues that are facing this nation, I think we're going to see that tomorrow could be a precursor to Republican victories in November.
Senator Street?
Look, yeah, I couldn't disagree more. Look, I think there are some on the far left who want to express concern because President Biden has been leading from the center. That being said, there's a binary choice in the general election. And in that choice, you're going to see Donald Trump, who Pennsylvania's rejected once, and I think will reject again. But not only that, the telltale signs have been the rejection of MAGA Republicans last year when Democrats swept statewide elections and in 2022. Listen, Doug Mastriano is about as good a stalking horse as you can get for what people think about Donald Trump. And I served with him in the Senate. He did terribly. Even moderate Republicans don't particularly care for him. And so I think what the problem is, there are some far left Democrats that would like us to have nominated a more extreme candidate. We didn't do that. Joe Biden is centrist. He's where most Americans are. And ultimately, the left wing of our party will realize they got to choose between Joe Biden, with whom they might disagree with on some issues, or Donald Trump, with whom they disagree with on almost every issue. And so I think in the end, Democrats will come home. They will vote for Joe Biden. And some moderate Republicans will also join us in keeping the country and centered where it needs to be with President Biden.
Earlier in the year, both Republican and Democratic state committees held endorsement meetings. What value does a state committee endorsement have?
Well, for our party, it's very important. I mean, we rallied and unified in September, actually, of last year amongst our statewide candidates, except for Attorney General, which at the time still had other contestants. The state party is unified around our state ticket. It's a great ticket, one of the best I've seen, with Dave McCormick leading it for the Senate, Stacey Garrity, Tim DeFore, and Dave Sunday, who are just tremendous. And I think they are going to present to Pennsylvanians that they are strong on these key issues. They're going to point out Bidenomics has failed. Inflation is costing the average Pennsylvanian over $888 more a month, over $10,000 a year. Gas prices are up since he took office. Mortgage rates are up, making it harder for people to buy homes. And our ticket of endorsed candidates are going to go out there and protect Pennsylvanians, make them feel more secure in their neighborhoods, and protect this border issue, which is producing record numbers of fentanyl deaths in our state, which is just tragic and a crisis that we need people like Dave Sunday and Dave McCormick and Tim DeFore and Stacey Garrity to address.
Senator Street, the Democratic State Committee chose not to.
think,
oh, go ahead, please.
Yeah, look, I want to say first, we have a strong ticket. Bob Casey has a record of leading in Pennsylvania, delivering jobs. And we shouldn't forget the terrible economy we had with record unemployment when Donald Trump was last president. We shouldn't forget the fact that when Donald Trump was president, the country he took one of the strongest economies in the history of America, created by Joe Biden, and when he was vice president, working with Barack Obama, and now Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have brought the economy back. The economy is red hot, and that red hot has caused some rise in prices, but it's also caused a rise in wages. We're looking at record unemployment, not in all sectors, including Black and brown communities as well. And so, look, again, there's a choice. There's a choice between Donald Trump's failed policies and failed economy. But not only that, Donald Trump talks about, and his folks talk about being pro police officer when they attacked the Capitol and they led an insurrection on January 6th. They've stripped away people's voting. They're stripping away the rights of women with the Dobbs decision. He brags about taking away the rights of women and getting rid of Roe v. Wade. Look, Joe Biden's for protecting the rights of all citizens. He's brought us a strong economy, and I think Bob Casey, Malcolm Kenyatta, Ryan Pizarro, and are all going to be strong candidates. So we haven't endorsed anyone for Attorney General, and it's anyone's guess who the Democratic nominee will be there. But I think we have we are cursed with a wealth of riches, and we have very strong candidates across the board for Attorney General.
Both presidential nominees have appeared in Pennsylvania over the last week. Are there specific geographic regions that are considered a hotbed or a bellwether for how Pennsylvania may go in November?
Well, I think President Trump and the presidential campaign are looking at all 67 states. The president is going to come to Philadelphia. I'm confident of that. He's going to go to the cities and in the suburbs and the rural parts of Pennsylvania. Again, with due respect to Senator Street, the lowest unemployment amongst the Black community, amongst women, amongst Hispanics occurred under Donald Trump. And he's going to go throughout Pennsylvania with Dave McCormick and the rest of our ticket and promote that. And they're going to promote the fact that we also need to have people feel comfortable and safe in their communities. And we need to address the border crisis. And when Senator Sharif Street says that Biden's policies have succeeded, then why are only 36% of Pennsylvanians giving him an approval rating? And again, amongst younger people, even amongst women on the economy, he's losing. And he's losing the Hispanic vote also to President Trump. So I think President Trump will be going throughout all of Pennsylvania, and I'm looking forward to seeing him here in Philadelphia.
Senator Street?
Look, Look, it is true that in the beginning of Donald Trump's term, when he was living on the economy created by Barack Obama and Joe Biden, he had a strong economy. But if you look at the trend lines in his term, he started off with a great economy and he created a terrible one. Joe Biden took the terrible economy that Donald Trump did, started off with a bad economy, and created a good one. The reality is that the day you are sworn into office, it's not your economy. You haven't done anything to create that. Donald Trump started off and bragged about the numbers and the success that Barack Obama and Joe Biden created, and then he tanked it like he's tanked businesses through that his father gave him. He tanked the American economy. He's been a fraud and a failure. And I'll tell you something, it's not even representative of real Republican values. He was reckless with foreign policy, and he was reckless with the economy, and he rolled back rights for the first time in our country's history. People had less rights after his presidency than they did before them. And so I think, look, you're going to see women are going to overwhelmingly vote for Joe Biden. You're going to see Black and brown communities come out, and you're going to see working class white men who in the past were maybe a little disaffected with Democrats realize that Donald Trump had a chance and he failed them.
I'd like to talk a little bit about public perception of each of the candidates. So, Senator Street, we'll come back to you first. What do you think is the Democratic Party's public perception of President Biden?
Look, I think people know that Joe Biden is stable. They're confident that he's going to right the ship. He may not be the most exciting candidate, but he's a guy that people can trust. People know that Joe Biden's honest. And they know that he gets up every day, rolls up his sleeves, and tries to do a good job. And I think in a state like Pennsylvania, the working man's candidate is what people are looking for. We say all the time, it's Granton versus Wall Street. It's a working man versus a celebrity, a reality show entertainer. And I think people want somebody who's going to get the job done, not somebody who's just going to put on a big show. And sure, Donald Trump puts on a big show. He made a lot of money doing that for years. But I think the show's played out, and it's time and people are ready for grown-ups to continue to be in charge.
Chairman Tabas, we'll come back to you now. How is the Republican Party perceiving Donald Trump?
Well, first, I would say that Wall Street and Hollywood has actually been with the Democrats these last many years. We've been more of the party of the working person. I think that the perception of our presidential candidate and our entire ticket is that the Republican candidates and the Republican policies are the ones that are most likely to address the concerns of the people of this state and of this nation. They're going to turn to our Republican candidates because we have the ability and the experience to protect the border issue, which is now making Pennsylvania almost a border state because of the fentanyl and overdose deaths. Ours is a party led by candidates who have policies who will reverse the slippage that has occurred during these Biden years in the economy, in the border, as I said, foreign policy, abandoning Afghanistan the way he did, set up the whole situation, in our view, in Ukraine and in the Middle East, because other nations saw that President Biden was willing to cut and run and abandon an ally the way he did in Afghanistan.
Has President Trump changed the Republican Party in any way since he held office?
Well, he has certainly been a voice out there. I think the Republican Party and our principles and values are values of making sure that the working people in our state are well protected, that there is great educational opportunities for our children, which to me is one of the major civil rights issues of our time, is that the children in our major municipalities and other failing schools are suffering, and we need to be able to give them the options that they need. The President Trump is very much in favor of the school choice and the school options, and we are as well.
Senator Street, did you want to jump in as well?
Yeah, look, I want to say I absolutely believe Donald Trump has changed the Republican Party. He took the party of Ronald Reagan, who said tear down that wall and wanted and united Americans, and made it the party of Russia. And he stood there as a lapdog for Vladimir Putin. You want to talk about setting things up? Donald Trump's placating, Donald Trump's refusal and to give aid to Ukraine unless they gave him political graft. Donald Trump's constant, sucking up to Vladimir Putin emboldened him. And now, even now, he is emboldened by the possibility that his lapdog might become president of the United States again. The Republican Party, Democrats and Republicans alike, used to be united in protecting our country, used to be united about stopping the threat of Russia expanding. Look, I just can't believe that there are so many Republicans now who are actually pro-Putin. That would have been unthinkable in the past for Democrats or Republicans to be pro-Putin. But the Republicans used to pride themselves under Ronald Reagan about standing up for America being strong, not placating Putin. And so, look, I think that the wars we're seeing and are directly tied to Donald Trump's weakening the perception of America as a world leader. He was a guy who was literally laughed off the stage when he went to the G8 conference in the past. It is absolutely ridiculous. And I'll tell you, Joe Biden has restored confidence. When he says America's back, he's provided real leadership. And this is a time when the world has a lot of challenging things going on. I certainly don't think people want to turn the White House over to Putin's lapdog. And as for the safety in our streets, look, Joe Biden is invested in actual making sure we have resources to deal with problems in communities, not try and scapegoat our problems on things that are happening thousands of miles away. We're not a border state. What's happening at the border is not what's causing our problems here. We need to pass responsible gun laws. We need to make sure that we have that we continue to invest in communities. We continue to invest in education. And finally, the Republicans in the General Assembly, where I serve, not wanting to invest in public education, it is laughable that party would now say it's the party of education. They want to take even more money away from public schools, put it into vouchers where only a small number of disadvantaged children will be there. And even the tax credit programs we have, Republicans have vastly overinvested in EITC, which goes to wealthier schools, as opposed to OSTC, which is designed to go into poorer schools. So even when they create those programs, they disinvest in poor kids and in working families, and want to shift money to the schools that the kids of their donors go to.
Let me shift our focus for just a second. What role do you think third-party candidates like potentially Jill Stein, Robert Kennedy Jr., et cetera, how will that impact what happens in the presidential race?
Well, we've seen this in the past. They do get a certain percentage of votes. If we have close elections, it can be a factor. Pennsylvania has had many close elections statewide over the last several years, and that can have something of a factor. But again, I think that the Republican Party and our candidates are demonstrating and will rack up larger numbers this time. We are going to, and we have started to invest in a very robust mail-in ballot strategy. For 3 years, the Democrats have had an advantage because many in our party were opposed to it. But I've turned that around. I've educated our voters. The president came out the other day and said he's in favor and in support of it. We will no longer, we're going to let the Democrats play like a football game 4 quarters while we're playing 2. We're going to be out there with mail-in ballot strategy, early voting here in Pennsylvania through that strategy. And we're going to be very successful by adding new voters to our ranks.
Do you think that there's still a mistrust of mail-in voting among some Republicans? And if so, how do you counter that?
I think there's concerns about it. But again, the voting by mail is an important legal method of voting in Pennsylvania. There's always issues with respect to, functionalities of elections. That's just a fact of life. There is no perfect process. But we have 3 methods of legal voting in Pennsylvania: at the polls, if you want, but voting by mail-in ballot or voting by an absentee ballot. And we are going to encourage our voters to take advantage of all 3 of those And we are going to make sure that they feel secure and they feel comfortable and just go out there and do it. And we're targeting to bring in extra and new voters. And by the way, we're getting a lot of Senator Street's allies because we are doing better in the Hispanic community, in the Black community amongst voters. And I do believe we will do very well amongst younger voters this time as well because they want a strong pro-growth economy.
Senator Street, what are your thoughts on how the changes to voting law in 2019 have impacted elections in Pennsylvania? We appear to, Senator, can you hear us?
Yeah, for a second there, it looks like I don't know what happened. I lost my Wi-Fi connection, but I did hear my fellow chairman talking a little bit about vote by mail was the last thing I heard. And look, I will just say Democrats believe vote by mail is an important part. Early voting is important. I'm encouraged to hear Republicans not denying the fact that we have a safe, secure voting system, particularly when the top of their ticket continues to be a little schizophrenic on this topic, where time to time he says people shouldn't vote by mail. It's not a safe system. Then other times he says it is a safe system. It's a safe system. I encourage everybody to participate in the process. We want to win because we get the most votes and everybody feels like the system is safe and secure, which we know it is. And we believe we will win. We've got strong candidates across the board. Malcolm Kenyatta is a young guy, going to energize young voters, get them engaged and involved in the process, running for Auditor General. Ryan Bizzaro comes from the Erie, and he is a guy who's well known up there, shown how to win in tough territory where some Democrats haven't fared as well. Of course, Bob Casey is known to all Pennsylvanians, but he is from northeastern PA. And even our president, Joe Biden, is a Scranton-born guy with the First Lady having been born in Jilly from Philly, from right down here in our home area. And so, look, we're excited that we have a balanced ticket of people who represent Pennsylvania, and we're going to encourage people to vote by mail, vote early. And I'm encouraged that now both parties can admit we have a safe, secure voting system in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
Senator,
Let
since
me just,
go ahead,
there, as I said, and maybe Senator Street's Wi-Fi went out, and I said there is no such thing as a perfect election system, and he knows as well as I do, even going back way before mail-in ballots, there are issues with machines and the human factors. I get all of that. But that all aside, the big concern that we have is, though, the lack of uniformity in the application of the law. It's important under our Constitution that the election laws be applied uniformly in each of the 67 counties. And that is the key. And hopefully that will be enforced. But in the meantime, we are strongly encouraging a mail-in ballot strategy. And we're targeting and going after new voters. And look at our voter registration numbers. As of a few days ago, the edge the Democrats had over us is down to 396,000, the lowest in more than 30 years. 10 years ago, it was 1.4 million. It was about 900,000 when I took over as the state chair. The automatic DMV voter registration Governor Shapiro put into place, we're beating the Democrats on that 34% to 30%. We've also switched 28,000 registered Democrats and independents to our party. So the momentum is going in our favor. And you add to that our mail-in ballot strategy, I think we will have large victories. And I don't think the third-party candidates are going to change that outcome.
We're going to continue our discussion in just a moment. But first, I'd like to give our guests a brief break and tell you about what's coming up on PCN. Join PCN for live 2024 primary election coverage on Tuesday night, starting at 8:30. We'll bring you poll results, interviews with the congressional races, and analysis from political experts. That's tomorrow night, starting at 8:30. This week on The Issues, Chris Bork, professor of political science at Muhlenberg College, will review primary election results, followed by Mark Davis, president and CEO of Pennsylvania Advocacy and Resources for Autism and Intellectual Disabilities, who will discuss the governor's budget proposals. That's Wednesday night, starting at 7. This week, Journalists Roundtable features Dennis Owens from WHTM-TV in Harrisburg, Kim Lyons from the Pennsylvania Capital Star, and Carter Walker from VoteBeat. Thursday night at 7 o'clock. All the great public affairs event coverage and interviews you watch at PCN are now available for free online at PCNTV.com and on PCN Select. Thank you for watching PCN. PCN is a 501c3 nonprofit television network that receives no government funding. We're relying on viewers and donors like you to help PCN continue to bring you everything Pennsylvania. To make a donation, visit PCNTV.com. Now we continue our discussion on the primary election with the chairs of the Republican and Democratic State Committee. Senator Sharif Street, you were just about to talk when we took our break. I'll give you the floor.
Look, I just want to say, in terms of momentum, there have been polls and prognosticators talking for the last 2 or 3 years talking about red waves, and in 2022 there was supposed to be a red wave, and that was the year where we flipped the Pennsylvania State House. We won the U.S. Senate seat. We won the governor's race. We added seats in the state Senate, and for the first time in decades, the majority of Pennsylvania's congressional delegation were Democrats. In 2023, they said it's going to be Biden's numbers aren't good. People are upset with Biden, registration, this and that and the other. We won all 4 statewide judicial races, and we added seats. And we took over more county offices and county seats than we did before. And people rejected the xenophobia that was happening at school board races across the Commonwealth. Now we're at 2024, and people are saying again, look, it's not going to happen. What's going to happen is the Democratic Party not only speaks for Democrats, but at this point, we're the voice of reasonable Republicans who are tired of the MAGA extremism that keeps coming out of Donald Trump's mouth, and people who are lackeys for him. We're the voice of independents as well. We're the voice of grownups in the room. And yes, that's caused someone on our far left to say, well, geez, why are they not? We need them further on the left. The Republicans speak for the far right. Why don't the Democrats speak for the far left? But we're trying to govern from the center. We've got candidates that are doing that. We've got a president that's doing that. Joe Biden doesn't want to be the president of just Democrats. He doesn't want to punish his enemies. He wants to unite the country and bring people together. He's been doing that. Bob Casey has been doing that, leading from the center, pulling people together. Ryan Pizzaro, Malcolm Kenyatta will do that. And ultimately, the Democratic Party will be successful, not just because we're able to energize Democrats, but because we're able to speak to those issues that are of concern to moderate Republicans, that are concerned to independent voters, that are concerned to the entire electorate, because that's what's best, not only for us to win, but that's what's best for this Commonwealth and this country.
Let's shift our focus briefly on the U.S. Senate race. What should our viewers know about the 2 presumptive nominees in this race?
Well, Senator Casey, who's been in public office for many years in different positions, he's really not that well known, and nobody can really cite to any major initiatives that he's done during his tenure. And he's tied to the Biden failures on the economy, on the border, in safety and security and foreign policy. He supports Biden almost exclusively 100% of the time. We have Dave McCormick, West Point graduate. He won the Bronze Star, extremely successful business person. He's added jobs to the economy. He's brought people into a better life and a better economic status. He's an expert in international affairs. He understands the China issue and how to deal with them. Pennsylvanians want someone who's going to stand up and be protective of their rights, their freedoms, making sure they have a stronger and better life ahead of them. And that's Dave McCormick. I mean, he has shown that he has the strength and the backbone. He came off a close primary loss in 2022, but he showed that Pennsylvanians, he's here to protect us. And with his track record, his business experience, his courage, his leadership, Dave McCormick is going to be a great senator, and I'm convinced he's going to beat Bob Casey, who literally has not done anything much more than just support Joe Biden in lockstep all these past 3.5 years.
How productive has Bob Casey been as a U.S. Senator, Senator Street?
Look, I think Bob Casey's been extremely productive. He has delivered for Pennsylvanians. But I do have to point out, look, I just can't understand how the Republicans, first they get a guy from New Jersey, now they get a guy from Connecticut. Can't they find a good Pennsylvanian to be their nominee for the U.S. Senate? Look, Dave McCormick is not even really a Pennsylvanian. He's from Connecticut. He was living in Connecticut. He's now pretending to live in Pennsylvania. Finding rich guys from out of state who can self-finance isn't what Pennsylvania wants. You got two billionaires over there, one from Connecticut, one from Wall Street, in the Republican Party. What has Bob Case been doing? He's been delivering for regular Pennsylvanians: roads, bridges, infrastructure, creating jobs for regular folks, new schools, making sure there's money to get school infrastructure replaced. Bob Casey has delivered money for small businesses. Bob Casey has been delivering for Pennsylvanians for decades. And people to say they don't know Bob Casey is the number one vote getter in the history of Pennsylvania, Republican or Democrat. So people know Bob Casey. They know they can trust Bob Casey. We got two guys from Scranton that are going to roll up their sleeves and fight for regular Pennsylvanians. And they got two guys from the greater New York City area who are, think their money can buy Pennsylvania, and it can't.
Lawrence Tabas, will residency concerns be an issue for Dave McCormick?
No, I think if that's the best issue that they have against Dave McCormick, they're going to lose. Dave McCormick was born and raised in Pennsylvania. His family is here in Pennsylvania still. He's an active member of Pennsylvania's community and society. And for them to say that he's not a Pennsylvanian, that demonstrates to me that they know Bob Casey is weak. Senator Street has been focusing on what Senator Casey's past history has been. Well, we're looking at the future. The future is 2024. Dave McCormick is that future. He is a Pennsylvanian. He's raised in this state, West Point graduate, smart person, smart business person, added jobs to the economy. He's the kind of person that will make sure that the foreign policy of this nation protects America. He will speak up, and he's going all throughout the state. To say that there's a residency issue, to me, that's a declaration by the Democratic Party that they know Bob Casey is in trouble and he is going to lose this November.
During Donald Trump's Lehigh Valley appearance about a week ago, he endorsed Dave McCormick. Lawrence, can you address briefly just the relationship between President Trump and Dave McCormick and the fact that he did not endorse Dave McCormick 2 years ago when he was running for Senate?
Well, that you're going to have to talk to them about that. I mean, we have a ticket of a presidential campaign, which is a national one. We focus primarily a lot on our state candidates, and Dave McCormick has been out there, campaigning and working very hard, and working with our team of Stacey Garrity and Tim DeFore and Dave Sunday. So, those issues and the support from the President Trump, I'm sure that Dave welcomed it. But we're running Pennsylvania races and issues here as well. And the presidential campaigns, they're national. I mean, both for the Democrats and the Republicans. And our focus is on the betterment of Pennsylvanians in 2024.
Senator Street, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, look, I would say it's, Dave McCormick has had to embrace a far right-wing extreme Donald Trump agenda. They talk about preserving rights. That's an agenda where he took away the rights of women to have bodily autonomy. He wants my little granddaughters who are in their infancy not to have the same rights that my 75-year-old mother had. He embraced that Donald Trump agenda, and that's what it took for him to get Donald Trump's endorsement. He had to embrace an extreme MAGA agenda. So now you have a Wall Street guy who's embraced another Wall Street guy's extreme MAGA agenda, where Bob Casey has been delivering for Pennsylvanians, fighting for the rights of regular Pennsylvanians, making sure that he delivered for schools while and they want to turn over our schools to investors. And that was part of Donald Trump's plan the last time, to give Wall Street control of education instead of investing in public education as it is. So look, you got Wall Street guys, they want to turn over to Wall Street now. And then let's talk about Social Security. They have Donald Trump and the Republicans have suggested that not even Social Security is sacrosanct. Joe Biden will protect the rights of seniors. He will protect the right to invest in Social Security. He's not going to turn over everything to Wall Street. He's not a Wall Street guy. He's a Scranton guy who will fight for regular Pennsylvanians, and so is Bob Casey. And Bob, if you talk, they don't want to talk about the past, about Bob Casey's past. The best predictor of future performance is past performance. Bob Casey has delivered for Pennsylvanians. He's delivered for our schools. He's delivered for our roads and bridges. He's delivered violence prevention dollars. Bob Casey's delivered for law enforcement. He has delivered for Pennsylvanians, and he will continue to do so when he's reelected.
All three of
I just have
Pennsylvania.
to say that Social Security Medicare issue. Senator Street brought that up a couple of years ago. Really, there's no evidence on that. It's almost laughable that they're raising that issue here. They're trying to distract from Biden's disastrous record, his base that's been abandoning them, that he can't focus on, protecting our borders, getting the economy steamrolling again and all. The fact of the matter is the Republicans strongly support and will continue to support Social Security and Medicare. And look, on the issue relating to the Dobbs case, I do have to say, yes, there is a perception that we have to repair. And the Democrats have wrongfully defined our position on that. But our candidates, we all agree that we have to speak for ourselves. They have to come out and be better at clearly defining their respect and their interest in protecting the rights of all women here. We all also agree, our candidates agree. We have a law on the books here in Pennsylvania regarding abortion. It's been on the books for years. There's been no effort to change or modify it in the 2 years since Dobbs. I am not aware of any efforts to modify or change it, but we have to go out there and be more clear about our respect for women and their rights and understand their positions and make sure that we are very sensitive. And again, I think you will find that once our candidates and our party starts to articulate that and not let the Democrats say what we believe in, that you will find that we're very much aligned with the great majority of Americans.
Well, look, I serve in the General Assembly. There are a number of Republicans in the General Assembly who right now want to roll back a woman's right to choose. You can look at their records. That is their position. And there are national Republicans in Washington that have advanced the idea of a national ban on abortion. They want to stop women from having the right to choose across America. So Donald Trump has also, he's wishy-washy on the issue. But he brags about taking away a woman's right to choose, ending Roe v. Wade. He brags about the Dobbs decision. He said it on television. And the Republican Party, and I would be happy to hear Republican candidates denounce Donald Trump's appointing justices that took away Roe v. Wade, took away a woman's right to choose, but they won't do that because they want to have it both ways. They want to take away women's rights to choose, but then they want to say they're protecting people's rights. They want to talk about investing Social Security dollars in Wall Street, and then they want to say that they protect the rights of seniors. They don't want to protect people's rights. They want to give all the money to Wall Street, and they want to continue to strip away women's rights. People know it. They're ashamed of it. It's a record they should be ashamed of, but because they are in the clutches of a MAGA extremist that doesn't speak for regular Pennsylvanians, that's why they don't want to talk about the fact that they have taken away a woman's right to choose, and they continue to advance risky schemes around Social Security and the protections our seniors need. And by the way, Republicans opposed in Washington and in Harrisburg Medicaid expansion that has brought health care to hundreds of thousands of Pennsylvanians. They opposed the Affordable Care Act, and there are still Washington Republicans talking about rolling back the Affordable Care Act, which would take away roughly 700,000 Pennsylvanians' health care. That's the truth. That's the record. And that's what we're going to be talking about. And that's why Joe Biden, Bob Casey, and Democrats up and down the ticket are going to win.
Before we run out of time, I want to talk briefly about all of Pennsylvania's row offices as well. All three of these are on the ballot. Let's talk first about the Attorney General's race. This is open on both sides. Tell us about the candidates that are running. Lawrence, we'll start with you. Your party has actually endorsed Dave Sunday. Tell us about him.
Dave Sunday, he's the district attorney from York. He's done a phenomenal job. He's reduced a serious crime in York. He's fought successfully against gun violence. He's helped protect against the drugs that have been infiltrating into our state. He's a U.S. Navy veteran. He's seen combat. He also believes in being not only in law enforcement and as an attorney general will show redemption as well, and believes in that. Look, a lot of our issues in this nation and in our state deal with people with mental health crises, with drug and alcohol abuse, and he understands the difference between that and the acts of violent criminals. He will protect us. He's a terrific, strong person. He's a tough prosecutor. And right now, it looks like the Democrat frontrunner, DePasquale, if he wins, it'll be a race against somebody who's never been a prosecutor. So Dave Sunday is going to be terrific.
Senator Street, the Democratic Party chose not to endorse in this race. Can you just give us a quick thumbnail sketch? Who are we looking at on that side of the ballot?
Look, we've got 5 candidates. They're all strong. Keir Bradford Gray will be it's a long history of criminal experience and would be effective. We've got the Bucks County Solicitor and Joe Kahn. We have Eugene DePasquale, who has served in the General Assembly, served as Auditor General, understands the values of Pennsylvanians. We've got Jared Solomon, experienced attorney as well as a member of the General Assembly.
Jack Stolzheimer.
Jack Stolzheimer, who's the district attorney for Delaware County. We have 5 great candidates. They've all done really well. And look, I just want to remind people the last democratically elected Attorney General, Josh Shapiro, was the one who took on the opiate industry. Josh Shapiro was the one that held them accountable, made sure that those executives who are producing opioids, dumping them in our community, making it in America, and then making 900 million additional doses. He took them and held them accountable. He made sure that they paid a multi-billion-dollar settlement. I think our next Attorney General, Democratic nominee, will walk in the shoes of Josh Shapiro and make sure that he protects Pennsylvanians from the big rich cats who are making opioids and selling them to us, and not make up myths about the border, and that being the reason that we have problems with opioids.
Let's just touch upon the other 2 borough offices very briefly. In the Auditor General's race, Tim DeFore is running unopposed for re-election. What should viewers know about him?
Well, first of all, Tim DeFore, I believe, may be the first Auditor General in Pennsylvania who was an auditor and is an auditor. He's had a lot of experience as an investigator in the state Attorney General's office. He's done a phenomenal job. He is a true auditor. He was the county controller in Dauphin County in Pennsylvania. Very proud of him, and he deserves re-election, and he will be. He was our #1 vote getter in 2020.
Senator Street, what should we know about who's on the ballot for Auditor General on the Democratic ticket?
Look, we've endorsed Malcolm Kenyatta. I think he will win. Representative Malcolm Kenyatta is a great guy, worked for the Chamber of Commerce, is a member of the General Assembly. Malcolm Kenyatta has said something that Pennsylvanians want to hear. One of the most critical functions of the Auditor General is to do school audits. Tim DeFore has stopped doing school district audits. Don't know why. Doesn't make sense. Malcolm Kenyatta is making sure that he's going to make sure our young people get a good education. When he does the job of the Auditor General, restore school district audits, and make sure that he understands that every cent we send in education is going to the best education for our young people.
And let's touch upon briefly on the treasurer's race. Stacey Garrity is running for re-election. What do we know about her?
Right. And again, I got to correct one thing. Tim DeFore has been doing school audits. He does the ones that the legislature has given him the authority to do. Stacey Garrity is phenomenal. She's a retired full colonel in the Army Reserve, a very successful businesswoman with a degree in finance, very supportive. She's been tremendous as the treasurer. One of her great things she's done is to start to return the unclaimed property of Pennsylvanians. Over 500 million has gone back to people in Pennsylvania whose property they did not have anymore. She's done wonders with the education program to help support our kids and getting a good college education and being able to pay for it. She's tremendous. She deserves re-election, and she will be re-elected.
And Senator Street, who's on the Democratic ticket in this race?
Ryan Pizarro is our endorsed candidate. Ryan's been a strong member of the General Assembly, understands Pennsylvania's finances, understands finances in general, and understands basic facts. Look, Stacey Garrity's still talking about the fact that January 6th wasn't an insurrection, didn't happen. And those were people who were just sort of wandering through the Capitol on a tour. That kind of ridiculousness shouldn't be in the leadership of Pennsylvania. Ryan Pizarro will not only take care of the finances of Pennsylvania, but he'll bring sanity to the office.
And very briefly, which congressional races are each of your parties targeting this time around?
Well, I don't like to be like Walmart telling secrets to Target, but I certainly will say that at least for one of them or two of them, I think we have a very good shot at defeating Susan Wild. We have a great shot at defeating Matt Cartwright, and I think the race in the southwest part of the state, we have a great opportunity there too. So that's about as much of our strategy I'll reveal, but I'm very optimistic in all three of those congressional races.
Senator Street?
Well, look, I'm going to thank him for giving me that great insight about Matt Cartwright and Susan Wild. Look, they've been always, I said that tongue in cheek. We all know that they were going to be targeted. Matt Cartwright is a guy who plays it down the middle, plays it straight, represents Northeastern Pennsylvanians, and will do a great job. Will be reelected in what's one of the tougher districts because it really is a true purple district. Susan Wild has delivered for the Lehigh Valley, which has grown by leaps and bounds since she has been there. She will continue to. We know it's going to be a tough race, but we're going to continue to fight for her as well. And Democrats, I think DeLucio out in the Southwest is going to do just fine. He's experienced veteran. He's done a great job connecting with voters, and he's going to win and hold that seat, even though that's one they always target. But I'll tell you something else. Look, in the Southeast, Brian Fitzpatrick represents a seat that's trending blue. I think that's an area we're going to make investments, significant investments. He is a military veteran, fighter pilot. I think she's going to do extremely well. And then we've got, I'm not sure who the nominee is going to be, but Scott Perry is in a district that should be safe for Republicans, is so extreme, so ridiculously out of step with Pennsylvanians. I think the 10th district is a seat to watch because I think the right Democrat emerges with the right messaging. Scott Perry keeps saying crazy things and going off the deep end. There's a seat that we could pick up. Scott Perry is too extreme for central Pennsylvania, and that's why a Democrat has a good chance of winning the 10th district.
Lawrence Tabas, chair of the state Republican Party, and Senator Sharif Street, chair of the state Democratic Party. Gentlemen, thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Senator Street. See you soon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. See you soon.
PCN's Ellen Frantz spoke earlier with Senator Rosemary Brown about her bill to ban handheld cell phone use while driving.
Welcome to our program. Can you explain a little bit about this bill?
Sure. Senate Bill 37 is a bill that I have been working on almost 12 years, and I was working on it when I was a state representative. It is very simply legislation to say, put the phone down, get it out of your hand, put it in a docking station, or use a speaker with it when you use it. Just don't hold it when you drive.
In recent years, as cell phones have become more popular and more common in everyday life, have law enforcement and EMS, people like that, discovered that distracted driving, is that more or less common than drunk driving, or are they about the same?
Yeah, it's actually a little bit more than drunk driving, but it is hard at times to get the statistics. Unless, unfortunately, there is a fatality and the ability to look through a phone. A lot of times when accidents do occur, we say crashes, actually, because they are preventable. You don't often have someone admitting that they were on the cell phone. But it is very, very obvious that we have a significant concern, especially with cell phone use distraction.
How will law enforcement, like police officers, enforce this law?
So that's one of the pieces of this legislation that makes it absolutely important to have as a primary offense, because right now there is a texting law in Pennsylvania, but the ability to know whether a driver is actually texting or what's happening, and if they have it in their phone, law enforcement really can't do their job to prevent crashes and actually help roadway safety. So this bill is very simply, if you have it in your hand or you're supporting the phone, sometimes you'll see someone with supporting it with their shoulder. That is where law enforcement will be able to say, pull you over and say, we have a hands-free law in Pennsylvania. You're able to use your phone, but please do so without holding it.
What are the penalties for anyone who is caught using a handheld cell phone while driving?
So initially, when we did this legislation, we had a tiered system: first offense, second offense, third offense within a certain time frame. But through the work with myself, through the House of Representatives as well, we have lowered the fine down to $50 for a summary offense. And one of the most important pieces that I think constituents should know is that this is about not harming the driver. This is about helping the driver, protecting innocent drivers, improving roadway safety. So it's a $50 fine. There's no points on your license. And I specifically included in the legislation that if this goes into law, within the first year, drivers will get warnings as they become more educated to understand that we have a new law in Pennsylvania.
You mentioned earlier putting the phone in a holder in your car. Is that not part of this law? Like they could have a phone in a holder as long as they're not holding it? And does that count for just texting or GPS use, things like that? Is it just texting and in your hand?
Right. So really you can use GPS, you can touch the phone, if you need to, if it's in a docking station or if it's, laid on your phone, laid on a console or something on speakerphone. So technically GPS is within that system and usually speaks to you if you have the right technology. If not, it would speak to you if you push the speaker button on your phone.
Other states have very similar laws to this about handheld phones while driving. Have they reported a decrease in deadly accidents at all?
They have. And again, the statistics can vary from state to state. There's definitely also a reduction in distracted driving crashes, but there also is too an overall use of the cell phone is reduced when one of these laws goes into place. And some of the advocates that I work with, of course, will always say the best cell phone use is no cell phone use really behind the car. But we understand that we are trying to be reasonable here, responsible. And so if you are using your cell phone, it would be through Bluetooth, through speakerphone, to just try to help reduce the distraction. Again, you have to remember you still are distracted, but we're trying to reduce it as much as we can within the realm of being reasonable for the driver.
Final question. The House just recently passed this bill. What is the bill's next steps?
Right. So this is the furthest this bill has gotten in the 12 years. I'm very excited. I'm very thankful for the bipartisan work that's been done here. And it comes back to the Senate on what we call a concurrence vote, because it did switch a little bit in the House of Representatives with an amendment. So this concurrence vote is the final vote from the Senate before the legislation would head off to the governor's desk. So I'm looking forward to this vote being positive and having bipartisan support and being able to have the governor sign this into law.
Senator Rosemary Brown, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
That concludes today's show. Be sure to watch PCN's coverage of the Pennsylvania primary election tomorrow night, starting live at 8:30 p.m. I'm Francine Schertzer. Thank you for watching.